Well, I just want to dig right into the text. I want us all to open up to 921 in the Pew Bible, or if you have it on your device, or when those of you online at home, we're going to be in the chapter 8 of Mark's Gospel. We're going to be looking at far more than what was read, and so I want really as many of you as possible to open up to the Gospel, because it is a great, great text. This is actually the literal turning point of Mark's Gospel. And the way that I was taught to study the Gospels are that each Gospel was written by a specific author to a specific audience with a specific storyline, an agenda, a point to make. And so in this text, we have to understand every gospel. If you understand why the story was written and what the point is, it informs you. Every time you read a story, it gives you the envelope to hold that entire story in. So want to encourage us to kind of understand that in this way. So here's what we need to know about Mark's Gospel. The first thing that we need to know about Mark's Gospel is that Jesus is very human. Now, that's pretty simple, right? Okay, Jesus was human, I get it. But actually, that's a unique feature to Mark's Gospel. Because in John's Gospel, the exact opposite happens, is Jesus is divine. He is really not much of a human. He's more like, I think John's Gospel is more of how we see Jesus in today's world. We tend to see Jesus as a superhero who's capable of doing anything. And so Mark's Gospel is a correction to that. Mark's Gospel emphasizes, because again, the story of Jesus is so complex, you need to look at it from different angles. The angle that this text takes, this story takes in Mark's telling, is that Jesus is human. He gets angry a lot, he gets frustrated. The cross is a huge painful experience for him, and he's very much a human. Not only is he a human in Mark's Gospel, but there's this thing called a messianic secret. Basically, Jesus' divinity is hidden. He goes to great lengths to make sure that nobody knows who he is. The gospel telling only mentions Jesus as the Messiah 4 times. And the first time, it's when the narrator tells you at the beginning of the book. So there's only 3 times that the people hear of Jesus being divine, and 2 of them are compacted right into this section. This section of Mark's Gospel is just kind of reaching the precipice and going over to the other side. So what happens before this? The context of this lesson, first of all, in Mark's Gospel, there is no childhood of Jesus. It just starts right at his baptism. Interesting thing about his baptism, to show the messianic secret, is when the voice comes out of the sky and talks about him being the beloved, it doesn't speak to anyone other than Jesus. The translation is, "You are my beloved." So the assumption is that no one else around him at the baptism actually hears who Jesus is. So he goes through his whole life, doing his whole ministry here, doing his thing. Jesus does Jesus things. He teaches, he heals, he talks about the leaders, he does miracles. Just look at the snippet that we have. If you look from the start of chapter 8, he feeds 4,000. He talks about, he kind of talks down the church leaders. He does a correction of who they are and what they're about. Then he cures a blind man. And then while they're walking, and this is a section that I want us to put eyes on, it is on 921. It is Mark 8, starting with verse 27. The paragraph immediately before what we heard Wes read, Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they answered him, "John the Baptist, and others Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." And then he asks them, "But who do you say that I am?" And then Peter, who is the alpha, who is maybe not the smartest, but seemingly the wisest, the leader of them all, of that 12, he becomes the hero. He says, "You are the Messiah." This is the first time that anyone has heard Jesus in Mark's Gospel referred to as the Messiah. You are the Messiah. And what's Jesus' response to that? Well, he sternly orders them not to tell anybody. Don't tell anyone. It's a secret, right? So, and then we pick up with what we heard Wes read, which is that he began to teach him that he must undergo great suffering, be rejected and killed, and in 3 days rise again. Peter, in a moment of vastly swinging pendulum emotions, he goes from being the hero to immediately going to be the goat. And I'm not talking about the good kind of goat, I'm talking about the bad kind of goat. He goes to be the goat. He pulls him aside. I mean, and it's interesting because it says, Jesus says this all quite openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at the disciples, so Jesus brings them back, he says, "Get behind me, Satan." He calls him satanic, the pain that must have caused Peter. But this is obviously, Jesus is human, he gets angry, he's frustrated with them, and he wants to make this very clear to everyone. He says, you are setting your eyes and mind on divine things, not on human things. And then he calls to the crowd, and he starts to teach them. And he makes it very clear. Those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for the sake of the gospel will find it. For what does it matter if you gain everything and lose your life? Now, the people in the first century who read this, and now us as educated readers of the gospel and understanding the story, we hear the irony in this. Because here you've got this whole story focused on this guy who is of the earth, whose divinity is being hidden. He is a man of this time and space, basically saying the stuff of the time and place doesn't matter. But what matters is the values you have, the ethic. What matters is sacrifice, which is rooted in love. So all of the stuff, the man of the things, the temporal guy says all of the temporal doesn't matter. There's an irony in that for us. And then what does he do? He goes up onto the hill, and the very next thing is he becomes transfigured. He literally becomes a divine being right in front of them. And it is at that moment, mirroring his baptism, where a voice appears from the cloud and says, "This is my Son, the Beloved," in chapter 9, verse 7. Listen to him. That's the second time that we hear Jesus being called the Messiah. So what does all this mean? Where's all this leading us? Well, basically the guy of skin and bones, the guy of physical things, is calling us to something new. To not worry about the things around us, the temporal, the physical, the things that we can touch, but rather to sacrifice. And he uses the cross as the symbol to point to that sacrifice, of the very cross that he will bear and that will bear him in a way of sacrifice. So the cross becomes the centerpiece. And the cross is very important to us. It is obviously a symbol. We wear it, we adorn it. Some people even tattoo it to their skin. But the cross, there's a new movement afoot among young Christians about the cross. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's kind of interesting. Many young people who are new to the faith, and it's interesting to see how faith works. It's kind of always been this way, this ebb and flow, that there's, everybody is all church and church is so important, and then people rebel against that, and the next generation says no, and now we're kind of again coming to a place where young people are rediscovering faith, and young people are coming to church, but they're trying to do it in a new way, and one of the ways that they're doing it is to not wear a cross as a symbol, which I find interesting. And their reasoning actually reminds me of early Judaism. So at the very beginning of the Bible, we hear about our Jewish brothers and sisters thousands of years ago who basically would not speak the name of God. So they came up with Yahweh. We can go to the next slide, I think. Oh, there you go. We go to who came up with Yahweh, which is kind of a transliteration of the name of God, because God's name was so holy, they didn't want to speak it. That's what it was rooted in. They do now the same. Young people are now doing the same with the cross. They don't want to wear it because they don't want to cheapen it. They don't want to make it a decoration. And they're a little worried about the hypocrisy of me wearing a cross, but me not acting very Christian sometimes. Like super aware of their own failures and shortcomings, they don't want to falsely advertise. And on one level, while that's not for me and that's not my way, you got to kind of respect the thoughtfulness and integrity that goes into that. And so the cross has become, I wouldn't say controversial, but just how it is used as a symbol, what that symbol means, that's become kind of a thing. Well, today is Flag Day. And it's a little known or widely celebrated holiday, but one that I've always been aware of just by where it sets on the calendar. It feels to me like the flag has been mired in this same kind of controversy that we now find with the cross. That the flag has become a controversial thing. And I find that to be, quite honestly, a shame. And it feels to me like Flag Day is precisely the day in which we probably ought to figure these things out and just come to an understanding of what the flag is and what it means, especially with regard to our faith. So, let me summarize at least. I don't claim to be an expert in these things, and if you know me, you know that I will never be partisan, nor rarely political. But this is kind of adjacent to that. So just to be clear, it feels to me like there was a thanklessness among some Americans, and particularly on one side of the aisle, in which there was kind of a thanklessness over all of the freedoms and the sacrifice that empowers us to be free. And there was almost an anti-flag, anti-country sentiment, which then prompted the other side to really want to raise up and lift up America and the values and the sacrifice that went into all of the freedoms and the privileges that we have. And the flag was then grabbed and used as the symbol for that side. And sadly, then it was twisted and distorted to be something else other than what it really was. I don't know, when I was a kid, I don't know if anybody else played this game, but we played a game called Capture the Flag. Not the American flag, but we would take a bandana and we would stick it on a pole, and you had to be able to get it without anybody knowing that you've gotten it. And whoever captured the flag won. Well, it feels like our nation right now is in the middle of a big capture the flag, the American flag, kind of fight or controversy. And there was a Presbyterian pastor who said it this way. His name is William Sloane Coffin, and he was a really leading pastor in the United States. He said there were several kinds of patriotism, and two of them he described was loveless critics, and on the other end were uncritical lovers. Loveless critics and uncritical lovers. And that's why both, with their distinct opinions about the flag, have mired our flag in controversy. So on this Flag Day, let's just ask the question, what is the flag to us? What does it mean? What should it mean? And who decides? What should our relationship with this amazing symbol be? Well, the answer to me is quite simple. There's one amazing act that embodies everything as it should be about our relationship with the flag. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it. If you haven't, well, you're fortunate. And if you haven't, I hope you sadly get to at some point in time. And it's an experience that I get to be part of regularly. And that is the solemn ceremony of the presentation of the flag to a loved one of a fallen veteran or soldier. It is in that experience, holy and sacred as it is, that we get it right. And because we get it right there, we ought to be able to look at what that is to ensure that we continue to get it right. So for those of you who've never been part of that, if an active duty service person or honorably discharged veteran passes to life eternal at their graveside, whether it's at a columbarium or whether it's at an actual cemetery, a member of the branch of military shows up, several do, to do this military honor guard. And after the rite of burial takes place, the military does their rite, in which a flag is opened, unfurled, and then meticulously folded back up. And then on bended knee, the flag is presented to the survivor. And this is said, this is what's said for the branch of military of the Army. This flag is presented on behalf of a grateful nation and the United States Army as a token of appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service. So who do we worship in that moment? What are we worshiping? We are worshiping our God who saves. Who are we loving, or what are we loving in that moment? We are loving the deceased, our family member who's gone, and our heart is grieving in love. And what is the flag in that moment? It is simply a token, a symbol that points to these things. What is our relationship to the flag? We love it insofar as it reminds us to love our God who saves and our loved ones who sacrificed in the way of Jesus so that love would be made known. I pray that on this Flag Day, we may, as Jesus taught us, to not point to the earthly things, but to the eternal things of love and sacrifice. Let us be in prayer.